things at the Four Seasons Hotel is their beautiful floral arrangements. And what do you think about that, Dan?
As an economist, I would say that they're all making stupid mistakes. The Four Seasons Hotel has a lot more to offer, and rather than reducing prices, because once you reduce prices, in the long term, people say, if you can sell it at that price now, why can't you sell it at that price in the future?
Well, that's part of what causes sticky prices.
Exactly.
You don't want to go back.
Exactly.
But they're not reducing prices. They might have discounts occasionally, but what they're doing is they're cutting costs, and it's a constant theme in, I'd say, basically all American businesses to become more efficient. The story of them not having flowers, and I think basically globally, or at least nationally, is maybe just a more common story of efficiency, of a company becoming more streamlined, which is generally positive.
Well, the thing is that they're going to start looking like the Holiday Inn, and they're going to end
No,
up...
I don't think
Well,
that's
I don't think so.
No, I don't mean that.
When's the last time you stayed at a Holiday Inn, Susan? Tell
That's
me.
actually true, too, though. Actually, they're actually not, a Holiday Inn is actually
I stayed
getting
in a
better.
Holiday
Yes,
Inn in
absolutely.
Madison, Wisconsin that looked like the Four Seasons. I stayed in a beautiful one with 20-foot ceilings. I'm telling you, I stayed in a beautiful one.
I think I've seen that one.
But the thing is, if you start, the reason people go to, like, let's say the Four Seasons is because they have these beautiful things, all these features, and they start cutting this and they start cutting that. And that's what I'm saying. They're going to end up looking like, when you walk in, that makes the people, all these amenities,
You can stay at the Ritz-Carlton. We stayed at the Surrey, and they're beautiful, wonderful hotels, well located. And what they're doing now is stay for 2 nights and get the third night free, because once they drop the price, let's say it's $900, okay? If they charge $300 a night for the 3 nights, then people say, well, if they can sell it for $300, why can't they sell it later on for $300? So what they do is they make it $650 for 2 nights and get the third night free. They protect their pricing integrity.
Well, I think Four
like
Seasons is a very small business on a larger scale. It's not General Motors or Toyota or Apple. But I would say that underlying this is a problem that major airlines are facing, a cutback in business travel. Should you video conference rather than travel? Cut back in business travel. A lot of the people who stay at Four Seasons, rather than people who are just extremely rich, would be people working for Goldman Sachs that want to reward their employees, want to make sure that they're as productive as possible and as motivated as possible. And there's not a lot of firms, and maybe not even Goldman Sachs, that really wants a lot of their employees to stay at the Four Seasons. So it's a dropping demand. We have the same problem with the airlines. Not as many people will pay $1,500 for business class to New York City from Chicago. So, and that's fine. I don't know, yes, it's lean times, but there's been sometimes a very weak business travel market.
So you think that the hotels, something like they should start cutting back? Or
No.
Or you don't feel that they should cut back? You feel they should cut back?
I actually don't think it's that big of an issue. If you go to Four Seasons, you might be upset. Most wealthy people don't go to Four Seasons that often. I'm much more concerned about the housing, the car market.
Right. But I'm not. The reason I brought that up is because so many things are getting cut back right now, and it's interesting too that each administration blames the one before about the economy. And but is the current mess a system of financial derangement, a sickness of the dollar, rather than why do these administrations? And you start talking to them. In fact, I was lucky yesterday. I was in a lunch with Vice President Joe Biden, and I got to talk to him for a little bit. And the first thing he did when I asked him was, the Medicare situation, that a lot of doctors are not accepting Medicare. And he says, he blamed it on the Republican Party. That's what it is. The Republicans did that. And if I asked the Republican, they would blame it on the Democratic Party.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
This is the blame game.
It's the blame game. Why are they blaming? Instead of saying, look, I don't know what happened before, I do know what happened before, but this is what we're going to do to prevent it or to go on. What is this blame game all about?
The real problem is people don't differentiate among the different types of business cycles. There's a Kondratiev cycle, which is a 40-year cycle. There are secular situations, there are seasonal situations, and if you look at them superimposed on the other, for example, if you have a declining economy and you have a business cycle, the peak of the second cycle could be very the same as the trough of the cycle preceding it. So you have to take a look at the interposition of these various cycles and how they impact the marketplace.
Well, let me put it this way. I have a couple analogies. Why would people think that I think that there's serious challenges. I think they could take us a very long time to resolve, given that housing and the auto market might never resolve. However, it is part of the cycle. We're used to boom and bust with the railroads in the 1800s. So why are people totally panicked if they're not out of work, if they're fortunate enough to have a job, if they've not been, foreclosed on? And the reason I was thinking, the first analogy I came up with is a stomach flu. You have a stomach flu, you think you're going to die, you feel the words that come to mind, they probably can't say on camera, but you feel really horrible.
Oh,
and then you survive that. You feel better, and then you think you're never going to have a stomach flu again. And you might 2 years later, if you're lucky, 2-3 years, and suddenly you're like, what is this? I remember this, but I forgot how bad it is. But the better analogy is probably the hangover, because that you're like, I'm never going to drink again, I'm never going to drink again. And depending on the person, it might be a month or a year later, you get a little carried away, excess. That's how a credit cycle works. Loaning, the loans go well, we're getting away with more and more, and then we loan to like the dumbest guy on the block.
But there's a correlation between the business cycle and the level of drinking.
That's true.
If you lose your job, you get tired, you go on to drink more, so you forget about your job.
Irrational exuberance.
Exactly.
I just want to tell you, according to Brian Westbury, who's an economist and the author of It's Not Bad As You Think, said, the capitalist system took the fall for what was clearly an astounding set of governmental mistakes. The real problem, he says, is mark-to-market accounting. It forced financial firms to take balance sheet losses into their income, and capital statements what looked like a stable bank or investment yesterday, which looks like a sick bank today. And he blames it on mark-to-market accounting. Now, maybe one of you or both of you can chime in and tell me, what is this mark-to-market accounting, and to tell our viewers what this is all about.
I bow to the financial economist.
Okay,
well,
economist.
I think that's one of the problems. I think it's a mistake to blame just one factor. I happen to have a great respect for him. Mark-to-market, the best example of where it can go horribly wrong, it's the idea that everything should be priced by markets, preferably like a stock market or some kind of financial market. And you guys probably all remember the flash crash about a month and a half ago, and really fluke situation, Accenture suddenly trading for no reason for 1/10 of a cent. I think it was at $99. Within minutes, it's 1/10 of a cent.
Is that Accenture? Or?
Accenture.
Yeah.
ACN. And the point is, there's absolutely no reason for it to be priced that. The assumption under mark-to-market is that economy markets are always so efficient, it's the best possible price, except when they don't work. Sometimes the price is bogus. And you can basically trigger a crisis that's not there by suddenly making assets look worthless that in fact have a lot of value,
right,
and force companies that may otherwise be solvent.
But when you do that, remember the factors that are behind a demand curve. Okay, you can get a shift of demand curve. There's a change in demand, which is a shift of the curve itself. But there's a change in the quantity demanded, which is a movement along the curve. And that's affected by changes in supply conditions. Nothing affects price unless it affects either the demand curve or the supply curve. It will either shift the curve or change its slope. And that's why you have relationships between competing. That's why if the price of skis goes up, price of skiing goes up, the price of skis go down. Why? Because people stop skiing.
But in order for a market of any sort to work, there has to be liquidity. What is liquidity? You always hear people on the New York Stock Exchange or on the CBOT or whatever saying liquidity. It means there has to be people at the market. So if nobody shows up to your farmer's market for some fluke reason, maybe it's raining or whatever, you have no pricing. So the mark-to-market accounting convention that was forced more aggressively on corporations, including financial institutions, is based on the assumption you always have a market. What happens when nobody or very few people show up for the market? Well, you might get strawberries that were worth $10 for 10 cents because they might not be able to get rid of it and they just might not have anything else to do with it. It doesn't mean that strawberries throughout this country are suddenly worth 10 cents rather than $10.
But you've got to realize that there must be an intersection of the supply curve and the demand curve. And you can have market segments where you have both a supply curve and a demand curve with no point of intersection. In that case, a price cannot be determined. And if you can't determine a price, you can't determine a volume. So the real issue is, what are the factors that affect the demand curve and what are the factors that affect the supply curve? to me, if prices are falling, I'm going to wait because I think it'll be cheaper in the future, and I don't buy now. Next week, prices to fall.
Well, I mean, if nobody buys a house in your block, you don't really have a market price of the houses on that block. If nobody, maybe everyone just plans to stay there for 20 years.
Okay.
And where is the market price?
There is
And then, and then somebody who has a foreclosure might be forced